All right, so we are joined for our final guest of the year from New York City, the star of Netflix, The Mole, Kesi Neblett. Just so much to unpack. Ivy League graduate, son, our daughter of the legendary Charles Neblett. We've got a room full here with us at Velma Jackson High School, and we're in the STEM career cluster for our college career readiness class. And we're recording this for our friends at Madison Central High School, Germantown High School, Ridgeland High School, Rosa Scott, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for taking some time for us today. This is a great way for us to end the year.
No problem. It's exciting to be here.
All right, so before we get into your career, because I've in your college path at Columbia, we have to mention your family. Your dad Charles Neblett was a member of the Freedom Singers and was a huge civil rights advocate in the '60s. Was on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday. So just talk a little bit about what you learned from him. Just the things he stood for and some of the crazy things he dealt with to fight for voting rights in this country.
Absolutely. So I think one of my favorite stories, and this is slightly tangential to your question about my dad, was when he was at SIU. So when he was 19, he was a freshman, sophomore attending SIU as a math and music major. And he's old. So he was born in 1941, which means like he's seen a lot in his time. But when he was in college, the college was still segregated. And so
Wow.
he really, really was not okay with that. And he ended up leading a protest in order to desegregate the college dorms on campus.
Wow.
So I think when you grow up in that household with these types of stories, and understanding how my father left SIU, Southern Illinois University, to go join the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, how he organized politically, was a big part of getting the Civil Rights Voting Rights Act passed in the 60s. And also hearing stories of him traveling the world and singing to raise money for activism, raise money for the civil rights movement, and the danger that that put him in, the danger that that put his friends in. And that was like my household. And this was
Wow.
stories that we would hear every day. And I think what's really special is that whenever he's around other people that he was in the movement with, because they were all in their like teens and 20s at the time, it's such a special atmosphere. And they're literally brothers and sisters. So they're like, I call them aunts and aunties because that's what they feel like to me. It just teaches you, you know what, like if something isn't right, you don't agree with something, you change it. You don't have to
Absolutely.
accept it. That's what I've been, and that's what's been instilled in me since I was really, really young.
Yeah, and I actually had the chance to visit Selma in January and went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge and sent a picture to our young people here to show them. I said, you need to look up what happened here in 1965, and your dad was there with John Lewis and also knew Martin Luther King. So just an incredible legacy for you. And one thing I always say is I don't tell anybody how to vote because I'm not smart enough to give anybody good advice. But a lot of people like your dad sacrificed a lot, and people were killed and people were beaten for Black people to have the right to vote in this country. And young people coming up about to be old enough to vote really need to take advantage of that and have their voices heard.
Absolutely. I highly recommend people going to Selma every year because it does put life into perspective. And I totally get it. It's a really tough environment to be in. I think that I have a lot of friends who are very cynical about politics in America and very cynical about, does your vote really matter? And for sure, it doesn't matter if you don't vote. That's a fact. So I think if you're choosing between the two, you should vote because even if you are skeptical about does your vote change things, there's a guaranteed way that your vote doesn't change things, and that's not voting. So you might as well vote.
Absolutely. It's got to be so incredible the stories you've heard and the people that you've gotten to meet with having such a legendary father. So that's really cool. Now, I want to talk about you. You went to Columbia. You're our first ever Ivy League grad we've had in this program, which is really cool. We have a lot of students now that are making great grades that may have the aspirations of joining the Ivy League, and you're also a Division I athlete. And we have a lot of athletes here with us with a variety of sports. So
Mm.
you played volleyball there at Columbia. So talk a little bit about, first of all, how tough was it to get into Columbia? And then when you play sports in college, it's different than playing in high school. You really have to be extremely organized because of the practice and travel schedule on top of the academic requirements.
Absolutely. For me, what really, really helped get through high school and get through college are my parents. And they're really incredible. I remember in high school, I was taking Java, which is a computer science course, and it was really tough, really, really tough. And this sounds so funny now that I'm going to repeat it back, but I was so annoyed I was getting B's on my exams. And it was the first time I had ever gotten a B in an exam in my life. And my mom had said to me, you know, Kasi, you can do anything. You are smart enough to understand anything. You just either need more time on that subject or you need more resources, like a tutor or someone to help guide you on that subject. And that gave me the centering that I needed academically to understand that just because you don't do well or just because something's hard doesn't mean you're not intellectual, like you're not intelligent. That's not what that means. That just means you need to adjust your strategy or your approach to learning certain topics. And so that was really phenomenal. And I kept that with me all through high school. And so I don't want to make it sound like it was easy because that's not what it was. But when you know that you're going to succeed, then it makes the journey feel not as hard because you're like, okay, yes, these are struggles, but it's all going to come out into the goal that I want. So I was definitely spending a lot of late nights studying, definitely in the tutor's office, in my professor's office a lot, but it wasn't discouraging. It was just, this is a step because I can do this. So getting into Columbia was really exciting, but I truly believe that I was prepared for it. And that was really, that was just a great feeling. But it's hard. I think doing sports and academics at the same time, a lot of people ask you to choose. A lot of people, I remember many times people said you can't do both. Either you're going to be academically strong or you're going to be athletically strong, but you can't do both. And that was really frustrating for me through high school because I was like, I want to do both and I can do both. And now you're making it difficult for me. And it's just about knowing what you want when you love something and you know that you can do it, just like going full-fledged forward. And then when I was in college, it was also really hard. I would say I definitely, they always say there's a triangle in college and you only can maximize on three things.
Absolutely.
And so I chose to maximize on my sports, my academics, and my social life, which means I gave up sleep. But
Yeah, but again, especially the Ivy League institution, you have to stay academically eligible, and you can't just skip practice. You have, you're on the road. You have all types of practice requirements, and then you were majoring in computer science engineering there at Columbia, which is one of the top computer science programs in the world. And you had a great internship at Boeing, and then went to Goldman Sachs. So talk a little bit about that because that is a growing field that really needs more young talent to get into it.
I love, love, love encouraging people to go into computer science because it really, really, I accidentally fell into it. And I'm so grateful for it because it changed my life. I think that computer science can be very daunting. And even for me, it was really daunting in the beginning, but I do believe that anyone can do it if you want to do it. But the amount of freedom it gives you, the economic freedom, the like mental freedom, the creative freedom is so empowering. It's at the core of it, you're just solving problems and you're just being analytical and critical. And that's at the root of computer science. And it changes how you think and view everyday life. But doing computer science at Columbia was very tough. But I do believe that if you find your community, you believe that you can do it and always be willing to ask for help, then you can push through it. It's also really special because people, when you go to an Ivy League or even go to like any higher education institution, period, you're going to be surrounded by people who are passionate about something. Yeah. And that type of energy is so contagious and it's so inspiring that sure, you don't have to be passionate about the same things that they're passionate about, but it's encouraging to find like what is right for you. And that's one of my like biggest takeaways from being at Columbia.
Yeah, and then also I think it's important to realize that computer science touches every industry. With the growth in healthcare, cloud computing, and you were at Goldman Sachs, which is not a computer company, but every company is going to need IT people. They're going to need engineers. They're going to need help desk people. They're going to need technicians. So this is a field that's going to continue to grow. And these college programs are going to invest more time and effort and money in this. So it's a really good idea. If somebody's kind of on the fence about what I want to do in college for a career, computer science is a great way, like you said, to have economic freedom. And a lot of these jobs are remote now.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe a lot of the conversations that I have lately is about people being really fearful of technology and being really fearful of like Chat GPT and what Microsoft and OpenAI is doing and all tech companies are doing. It's scary. And I imagine that we had that same feeling when the internet came out. And my hope is that maybe if more young people get into computer science or get into what it's like to be developing in machine learning, that you don't have to fear it as much because you can understand the limitations and the extent of it and understand your environment better. So I think on top of the flexibility, on top of the economic freedom, it really is so ingrained in our world, whether it's through your finances, through what apps you're accessing every day, through how you're ordering your food, how you're calling an Uber, you're touching it. So it's great to at least really have a good understanding of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and now before you left Goldman Sachs, you were in cloud computing. So talk a little bit about what cloud computing is and what all you did there at Goldman Sachs when you were working in the tech field.
Yeah, so I worked for Goldman Sachs for about 4 years as a software developer. And let me tell you, Goldman Sachs definitely lives up to its reputation. I was working a lot, but at the same time, I was learning a lot. And that's what I'm really grateful for. And I was meeting amazing people along the way. I think what's really cool about Goldman is if you've ever had a group project where, when you're in a group project, you always have that person who does the most and that person who doesn't do a lot or doesn't do anything at all.
Oh, yeah.
At Goldman, that never happens. Everyone always does the most. And it's really fun to like work on projects like that are changing the world. But specifically what I did at Goldman Sachs, I worked in private infrastructure. And private infrastructure, the best way I can explain it, it's like if you have an iPhone and if you use iPhotos, there's an option for iPhotos to store your photos on the cloud.
Uh-huh.
So what's happening there is like the photo isn't really stored on your phone. It gets sent to another computer and it gets stored there. So that way you don't take up space on your phone. Like, I only have 68 gigabytes on my phone, which is really annoying, as you can see on my face. But I ran out of space quickly. So I back up all my photos like onto the cloud. So it's just getting stored on somebody else's computer. And then when I want the photos, I can say, hey, I want those photos. I send a request to that computer. They send it back to me. Almost like a very sophisticated, very fast email. And that's essentially what cloud is. It's saying, okay, I don't have enough space right in front of me. So let me use someone else's computer to do all the work, store all the data. And then when I need it, I can just say, hey, give it back to me. And then it gives me the answers or the product that I want. And if you can imagine a bank, you're doing that at huge scale because a laptop isn't enough space, enough compute power to run the calculations that a bank needs to run every single day. So we say, hey, let's buy a room full of computers, put it somewhere, I don't know, in like maybe London, and then let's send all our work there. And then when we need it, we get it back. So it's somewhat similar to that. And that's the application that I used to work on, is managing that entire process.
Well, that's a great way to explain it. And on top of all that, you have to keep it secure because you not only do you have money, you have identities that could be compromised. So the security of the network has to be just as good as the speed of the network.
Yeah, it's super complicated, super complicated. And what's really cool about my role is that I didn't have to do all those tiny details, but I had to understand it because the system that I worked on was putting all those like details together. So it was putting like, okay, how do we handle security? How do we handle storage? How do we handle like user access? And I didn't have to implement each of those things, but I had to understand them to put them into like a central system.
Absolutely. And then you famously quit your job to pursue your creative career. And I'll let you tell the story. I already know it about then you were the star of The Mole on Netflix, and how you fell into that was really cool. So I'll let you tell the story.
It is a fun story to tell because it's so random, and it also drives the point that the universe really does send you opportunities when you prepare yourself for it. And I had just quit my job at Goldman Sachs. And I remember my parents, my dad was like, "You're going to quit a job and you don't have another job?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to quit my job without another job and just travel." And that was my plan. I put my resignation letter in, and I had already planned. I was like, I wanted to go to like Bali for like months. I wanted to just bounce around the world essentially. And the day after I quit, I was sitting in the living room with my brother, like basking in my newfound freedom. And my friend from high school texted me and said, "Hey, like my wife is casting for this new show. They're looking for like smart, fun, athletic people, and I think you'd be really great for it." And I started laughing because I thought it was a joke. You know how the timing was just too coincidental. It was the day
Absolutely.
after
Yeah.
I had just quit my job. And my brother read the message with me. He goes, "You know what? Like, why not, Kasi? Like, you don't have anything to do. You might as well just like see what happens." I was like, "That's true. I don't have anything to do." So over the next 4 months, I was still traveling. I was like in Hawaii, bouncing around. But in between my travels, I would have these random Zoom calls with the producers from the show. And they would just ask me like questions about like, what are you afraid of? Like like behavioral interview things. And I remember the day that I got the call that I was casted on the show. I was in Hawaii. I was in like the country part of Hawaii that did not have like great Wi-Fi. And the only Wi-Fi was in the closet of the Airbnb that I was staying in. So I like opened the call. I'm in the closet. They're like, "Are you in a closet?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in a closet," because this is where the Wi-Fi is. And they said, "Hey, you just got casted to be on the mole." And I was freaking out because it was like it's like a once in a million, like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I like booked it home from Hawaii to start packing for Australia. Then they called me like the day before my flight to Australia to say, "Actually, we don't want you just to be a player. We want you to be the mole." And I was like, "Get out of here." And they're like, "Yeah, like this is real." So I said yes, and off we were. The next 2 weeks, I was quarantined in Australia because it was still very much COVID at the time. And for those 2 weeks, I was just studying. I was reading about human behavior. I was reading about psychology. I was reading about espionage because oddly enough, when you're a secret, being the mole is like very similar to being a secret agent. I read a lot of like John Le Carre's novels, which he writes a lot of espionage novels, and he's the one who like kind of coined the term the mole. So it's very fitting. I watched like hours and hours of like the Belgian Mole, which is like the original series.
Yeah.
And it was truly a deep dive endeavor because I had never done anything like this before. And I really wanted to be prepared. So we built out a strategy from all of those, like all the things, information I had gathered. And then for the next 8 weeks, we were filming. And I think we created something pretty special.
Yeah, because I was telling the kids before you came on, I'm not even a big reality TV fan, but I couldn't stop watching. It was so cool. And then when you finally revealed your strategy at the end, I was like your jaw drops because you're like, that's why she did that. So it was really cool, the whole thing. And I've encouraged everybody watching later, you really need to check it out. It was such a great series. Um, and it was really cool to watch. It's such a great cast of characters, and getting to be in such a beautiful country for that amount of time just had to be such a thrill. And like you said, you said yourself, you have a civil rights legacy to a Netflix star to really, and again, in you're from Russellville, Kentucky, which is right up the road from where I used to live in Clarksville, small town, kind of in the middle of nowhere, but yet, you're right there on the show for the whole world to see. It's just such a great accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you. No, and I definitely am a big proponent of you never get anywhere alone. So I definitely did not make it to Netflix by myself. I think I'm truly a product of my family and a product of my chosen family. And it's been really fun to share that with them because I hope that they understand that this is something that they can celebrate for them too, because they've been such a big part of building the person that I am.
That's awesome. Well, I do have some questions from the students, and I'll get to as many of these as I can. These are all ninth graders.
Mm.
This first one is Tykevian Boyd, and he asked, "Is it hard to be on TV with cameras constantly following you?"
That's a great question. It is super weird in the beginning. Super, super weird because it's just in your face, and like who's living life like that? When was the last time you had a camera in your face for 24 hours? So I think, for example, I remember the first episode, and this was probably the funniest time when there was a camera in my face. We were sleeping in the jungle, and we truly did sleep in the jungle in the first
Wow.
episode. And I remember waking up to cameraman walking around where we were sleeping. And I was like, that's crazy. And that really tripped me out. But I also think one thing that I really learned when you're on reality TV, you do grow a lot because what it's doing, it's like showing you a 24-hour window to how you behave, and you can
Wow.
see yourself and see your decisions. And you feel like you're doing one thing, but when you're watching yourself, you notice things that you haven't noticed about yourself before. And it's it's very revolutionary, I do believe. And one thing I did learn, that I was scared of the camera. I was really scared. I think naturally I was a person that loves being in the background. If you get me with like my friends, like they're all like way more dramatic, way more just theatric than I am. And and my family's the same way. I'm like the youngest of 6 kids. So I'm used to just like kind of chilling in the back, you know? And I had to understand that sometimes it's okay to be in the spotlight and to step into the forefront. The duality is perfect, being able to oscillate between going back and to and fro, but you can't be afraid to be like in the spotlight as well, and own like who you are, and own your presence, and own your space.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You know, we had earlier this year, we had the former mayor of Jackson um, join us, and he said, "Look, the hardest part about being the mayor is having the camera constantly follow you. So it's got to be nerve wracking. But yeah, I thought you did a great job. This is Jada Schaefer, one of our cheerleaders here at Velma Jackson, and she had said, "When you were a child, did you ever think you'd be on television?"
That's also a great question. I was a very volatile kid with my dreams. So I wanted to be so many things. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be like a secret agent. I wanted to be an actress. Then I wanted to be an architect. I was all over the place. Then I wanted to be a writer. There were so many things. So television or being an actress was on that list, but I don't think I was serious about it. And I definitely could not have imagined that it would have happened this way. But I do think that's a really big benefit about being open-minded and not being afraid, because when you're open-minded and not afraid, opportunities will come to you, and you can't be fearful to say yes, or at least try.
Absolutely. I mean, and you know, and I always say, I've made plenty of mistakes in life, but I always say the one thing that the only regret I have is I didn't bet on myself when I could have. If something doesn't work out, at least I know. So taking that chance, you never know when it does work out. It's all worth it. This is a great question. This is Caitlin Perry. She asked, "What is the biggest pros and biggest cons of computer science?"
Mm, that is a great question. I would say the biggest pros of computer science is how it teaches you to think. So I think one of the first programs I ever had to write in the first class that I had was probably about how do you add numbers. I think we were building a calculator. And it was so weird to break down kind of how your mind thinks and put it into these tiny, tiny, tiny steps and create a solution for it. So everything that you do, like when you think about adding something, you can just do it in your head. Like if I say 2 + 2, you're gonna automatically be like 4, but like what are you actually doing when you're adding 2 + 2? And
Wow.
that's what I had to learn when I first started computer science. It's like, what are the tiny little steps that we do so quickly that we need to break down? And that's a really cool way to think about life, and a
Wow.
really cool way to think about what's happening around you. So I think the biggest pro is the way you view the world. You start to view it, yes, in like an artistic way, but also in a very like concrete way. Like if there's a problem, you can't just say, hey, like we need to change this. Like actually, what are the like tiny minute steps that we need to do to actually change this? And that's a beautiful mindset to have. I would say the con, I mean, it is hard. I would say sometimes I get stuck still to this day on certain problems, and that's really annoying. It's like, like I being stuck on anything is not fun, but it's also it kind of comes with it. But I think that's about it.
Awesome. This is an interesting question, and I've always wanted to ask somebody this myself that was on a reality show. This is Jaden Thompson, and he asked, "Was the way you were portrayed on the mole the way you really are?"
Mm, this is a great question because I remember watching the first drop of the mole, and I was texting Will at the time, and we were like talking a lot about how the show was going. And he was like, "Who are you?" Because he hadn't seen, especially being the mole is very different because the way that I am in interviews, I have to pretend that I'm a player.
Yeah.
And he had never seen that, obviously, because I'm the mole. And I was like, I don't know, like that's crazy. But then my brother was like, this is seems exactly how you are. And I was like, are you sure? Because I don't feel like this is how I normally am. But what I realized is that it was a side of me. And that what's really hard about reality TV is that it's tough to understand all the facets of a person in one series, especially when you're one of 12 characters. And I think that you got a piece of me, and that piece is like pretty accurate. And that's the piece where I am slightly more reserved, a little bit quieter, like more like standoffish in a way, but still really genuine. And but I do believe there's other parts of me as well. Like I can be really playful. I can joke around a lot. I'm not always so serious. Sometimes I can be very analytical, very critical. And you don't get as much of that, but what you do see is just kind of like it's definitely a part of me. It's just not all of me.
Yeah, but I thought it was cool at the end. The facial expressions that they showed them some of the times you were doing when no one was looking were hilarious. So you definitely
I,
had the faces down pat.
yeah, and I think those spaces of like those are really great glimpses into the other parts of me.
Here's a good one. This is Christian Smith. He's one of our football players here, and he asked, "You had a great job. What made you leave it?"
Hmm. I think it was a multitude of things. It was one, I really enjoy my job a lot, but it isn't, I never thought that I would retire from it. I think our parents were the type of generation that you start a job, you work at that job for the rest of your life. That was never going to be me from the get-go, for sure. Um, I think the second part was I was learning a lot at one time, and then I did feel like I was hitting a wall where I wasn't learning as much. And then the third, I think another factor too is that I love exploring. And I think especially with tech, it's really, really advantageous to explore how different companies do things. So that was always on my mind. And then lastly is I do feel like I have multiple interests. It's not just technology. Like I would love to travel, I would love to write, I would love to try other things. So I think the accumulation of all of those factors led me to say, hey, like now is the time. Like I'm also kind of tired. I think that was a big thing too. And maybe this is probably the thing I'll emphasize the most is listen to yourself. A lot of times people will tell you what you should be doing, especially like when everyone else is doing a certain path beside you. Like all my friends were getting promoted. All my friends were like trying to like make it to vice president, trying to like make it to managing director in that same company. And I had to decide, okay, like that's not for me. I need to rest because I've been working hard for a very long time. And I had to be okay with that and I had to be confident with that and be confident about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes a leap of faith, but obviously it worked out. Just got one more from the students. This is Michael Sherrill, also one of our football players, and he asked, outside of your family, who was your biggest influences?
Hmm, that is a great question. I'm gonna have to think for a moment because my family is really, really a big part of my life. Okay, since I can't say my family and I could go run the gamut with a list of them of how they've changed my life, I would say there's always been a community around me that's been just, oh my God, just encouraging me or just changing my decisions or directions and have just made me the person that I am. And I could also go through a list of them from like volleyball coaches to teachers. There's so many, but the one I want to say now is the one that's recently changed my life. I think I'm choking. 1 second. And her name is Jules. I had met her in Mexico. I was in Mexico for about 2 months after filming the mole, traveling. And she had been traveling for about 9 months at the time. And we were staying in the same hostel and we just kind of hit it off. She's like this German girl, really, really cool. And I asked her, I was like, okay, like, Jules, what do you do, when you're traveling? And she was explaining how she doesn't do anything. I said, what? What do you mean you don't do anything when you're traveling? She goes, I like go to cafes, I sit on the beach, I take walks. I was like, well, you've been traveling for 9 months. How many cafes, how many walks can you go on? And how many hours can you lay on the beach in 9 months? I was like, do you not like do anything? You don't like write, you don't like make something, you don't, what else? And she goes, no. She's like, I do nothing. And she explained that, in life, especially in this moment, she's from Germany and she's in Mexico, and she's not going to see these sunsets again. She's not going to see these people again.
Oh.
And she's not going to have this moment again. So all she wants to do is be present and take it in. And she was so confident in that. And I was so confused, and it didn't even faze her. Like, it wasn't like she was like, oh, should I change? Oh, like, what's wrong with me? She was like, no, this is what I'm doing. And I've been doing this and I love it. So that really impacted me, because I think being authentically and very confident in the decisions that you make is such a beautiful thing. And so that changed a lot, just her simple life story.
That's incredible. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us today. But before we go, first of all, everybody needs to watch The Mole on Netflix because it's a great series. But lastly, you come from a small town. You grew up as a young Black girl in a small town in the southern United States. But yet you've become a worldwide TV star, a tech professional, an Ivy League grad, despite all the obstacles that a young Black woman faces in this country. So it's obviously it can be done. So even if, obviously everybody can't go to Ivy League school. Everybody can't be Division I athlete. Everybody can't be on TV, but yet people can still overcome the obstacles that they're going to face that you faced. So what can they do now to start preparing themselves to be just as successful as someone like you?
Well, one, I hope that everyone here is more successful than I am. And that would be the dream. I would love that, for you to surpass all of these endeavors. But I would say it's twofold. One, build your community, and two, build your skill set. And when I say build your community, it's find the people that are for you and really in your corner. So that could be your parents, a friend, a teacher, just someone that that's going to encourage you, speak life into you, and like hold on to them. Someone you can bounce ideas off of, someone you can like go to, just be like, hey, like I'm curious about this, I'm thinking about this. Do you have any advice or any guidance? Keep those people, build that. You'll know exactly who they are because you'll feel it, like it's in your spirit, that spiritual connection. So maintain that. Then the latter is build your skill set. So it's navigating the world there, you can make it easier on yourself. And yes, you will be Black, brown, some color, man or woman, but make yourself strong and give yourself a tool set that can really help you navigate the world. So yes, I came from a really small town, but education was a really, really strong tool set.
Absolutely.
I did not come from money. I did not come from a family where we had a history of going to college, but my parents 110% said that your fastest ticket would be taking your education seriously.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of support for you if you take school seriously to go through college. And once you get on that track, it just gets a little bit easier sometimes. Once you get into the college that you want to get into, once you're choosing the major that you like, once you're excelling in those areas, then the job becomes a little bit easier. Once you get the job, then the economics becomes a little bit easier. And so I would say take those two things. Build your educational tool set, find the subjects that you love, go into them, enjoy them, like annoy your teachers, talk to them all the time. And then that's what I would advise, those two things.
Yeah, and that I think that's so great for us to end the year with you saying that, because the first day of this class, I told them the same thing. Opportunities happen in life when you take education seriously, and then people take you seriously. No matter
Mhm.
who you are, that's always going to be the key. So thank you so much. Kesi Neblett, New York City, the star of the mole, Ivy League grad, just up and coming, everything, tech superstar. Thank you so much for taking some time for us today.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for being
And everybody watch The Mole on Netflix.
here.
All right, talk to you soon, my friend. Really enjoyed it.
Bye.
See-